Early in 1588, Queen Elizabeth of England began to mobilise for war with Spain. The navy would be the first line of defence, but land forces also had to be organised. England had no standing army. Instead, the fittest men of each community were formed into local companies, given weapons and equipment, and instructed in their use. The Lord Lieutenants of every county were instructed to muster these companies and drill them in readiness. The nobility was called upon to supply their horses and retainers for the cavalry. In a spirit of patriotic fervour, the members of the gentry volunteered their services and donated funds, horses, muskets, and such men as they could spare from their estates. Some 50,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 horses were assembled. 29,000 men from London and the south of England formed the Queen's Defence Force. At the mouths of the Thames and Medway estuaries, leading into the North Sea, pontoon barriers were erected. Should Spanish vessels succeed in penetrating these defences, every strategic bend in the Thames concealed an artillery platform to deter the invaders with a barrage of gunfire. 1,000 beacons were mounted on tall iron poles, the length of the southern coast, and upon every commanding hilltop in Sussex and Kent. At the first sight of Spanish sail, these baskets of pitch and tar would immediately be set alight, one after the other, sending the alarm to London in 20 minutes or less. As England waited, the Spanish invasion forces were assembled in a seemingly invincible armada in the port of Lisbon. Never before in Europe had so many vessels, fighting men, and provisions been gathered together in one place to set sail simultaneously and travel such a distance to the battleground. Following the death of the elderly Marquis of Santa Cruz early in the year 1588, command of the Armada was entrusted to the Duke of Medina Sidonia. Although the Duke lacked experience in naval warfare and was at first highly critical of the entire enterprise, Medina Sidonia was a skilled and tactful leader who had earned the respect of his captains. The Spanish fleet of 130 great ships left Lisbon at the end of May 1588, and, after struggling against strong headwinds, set sail again from the port of Corunna in late July. The strategy that Philip had finally settled upon, with little reference to the professional commanders, called for Medina Sidonia's armada to rendezvous in the English Channel with a fleet of small transport vessels and barges carrying an army from the Spanish Netherlands led by the Duke of Parma. But the message that Medina Sidonia sent to Parma announcing his arrival in the Channel did not arrive on time. Instead of meeting with Parma's support fleet, he found the combined forces of Elizabeth's Royal Navy and her merchant ships ready to pound the Spanish vessels with artillery fire. In terms of the numbers of both ships and guns, the combatants were equally matched, but the Spanish were not adequately prepared for the battle that ensued. Their soldiers, armed with pikes and muskets, waited on the decks to confront them according to the traditional rules of warfare. Instead, the English artillery began to bombard their ships from a distance. As a result of constant practice and extremely efficient design of the guns, they were able to fire about 10 rounds to the Spaniards' 1. In addition, the Spanish guns were constantly impeded in their movements by the large numbers of soldiers on board their ships. At Gravelines, off the Flanders coast between Calais and Dunkirk, the English moved in closer for the kill. During the night of August 7, 1588, 8 fireships, unmanned vessels packed with explosives and with loaded guns that would fire when the heat reached them, were directed toward the Spanish formation. Panic-stricken Spanish captains ordered their anchors to be cut, causing their ships to run aground or drift helplessly away from the rest of the fleet. The next day, during a 9-hour battle, the English gunners crippled more Spanish ships and blasted others full of holes as they struggled to escape. What the English cannon started, the weather finished. Fierce storms drove the remnants of the invasion force northwards, up and round the coast of Scotland, and down towards Ireland in the west. Warships sank in Tobermory Bay, off the Hebrides and Isle of Mull, and the Irish coast of Donegal. One, driven far north of the rest, went down in the frigid waters of Fair Isle, between Orkney and Shetland. Crews were forced to abandon ships beyond repair and take their chances on hostile shores. Medina Sidonia's flagship, its ruptured timbers lashed together with a rope, took a month to struggle home to Spain. Philip's great crusade against the heretic Queen Elizabeth I ended in complete disaster. Sir Walter Raleigh offered a professional soldier's opinion of Philip's failure. To invade by sea upon a perilous coast, being neither in possession of any port nor stuck in by any party, may better fit the prince, presuming on his fortune, than enriched with understanding. The undeclared war between the two kingdoms would continue until the end of Elizabeth's reign, but the once indomitable Spanish navy was cut down to size. The devastation of the Spanish Armada in 1588 was a major blow to the prestige of the Spanish Empire in Europe. However, she still had possession of the huge colonial territory in the New World. That colonial empire stretched from San Francisco Bay to the Rio de la Plata. The challenge now was to maintain that empire. Silver was an especially profitable export for the Spanish crown. The Americas held huge stores of silver, along with native populations to mine the mountains. This made Spain incredibly wealthy, allowing it to wage a long series of wars and conflicts. Under the Habsburgs, a series of strategic goals were laid out for Spain. These included full exploitation of the Americas for trade with Asia, and preventing other European nations from doing so. They were also determined to maintain a Habsburg hegemony in the Holy Roman Empire and defend the faith against Islam and the Protestant Reformation. The wars that Spain involved herself in pursuit of those goals, did not always go well for her. At the same time that the Spanish military was embroiled in a long, bitter conflict in the Netherlands, Spanish colonists were establishing trade routes, circumnavigating the globe, establishing viceroyalties in New Spain or Mexico and Peru, and importing a variety of new foodstuffs into Europe. These included potatoes, tomatoes, corn, and chilies. However, they were unable to keep their trade monopolies against other empires. In the late 1790s, Spain allied itself with Napoleon Bonaparte in his conquest of Europe. However, after a falling out with the new Spanish king, Ferdinand VII, Napoleon invaded Spain in what has come to be called the Peninsula War. Napoleon forced the abdication of Ferdinand and installed his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, onto the Spanish throne. French rule was rejected by the vast majority of the Spanish people, resulting in the Spanish War for Independence. It ended when the coalition of European nations defeated Napoleon in 1814, and King Ferdinand was restored to the throne. Meanwhile, among the colonies in Latin America, a widespread rebellion was fermenting. The first nations to successfully assert their independence were Argentina and Venezuela in 1810. The following year, Paraguay also became an independent nation. Over the next decade, a succession of other nations followed, including Uruguay in 1815, Chile in 1818, and Peru in 1821. In Venezuela, a powerful military leader by the name of Simon Bolivar led campaigns of independence in Peru and Alto Peru, now Bolivia. Panama also gained its independence in 1821. In that same year, the Viceroyalty of New Spain, or Mexico, declared its independence. By the mid-1820s, Spanish holdings in Latin America had been severely diminished. She was now left with Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, Equatorial Guinea, and the Philippines. Following the sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898, the United States declared war on Spain. The war lasted for just 16 weeks and resulted in the United States' acquisition of Spain's Pacific possessions, namely Guam, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. The Treaty of Spain, which ended the Spanish-American War, brought an end to the Spanish Empire. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below. And we'll see you next time on History Junkie.